All right, we seem to be streaming now, so I'll go ahead and call the third case on the docket. Before I do that, though, I'm Judge Thomas E. Malone. We also have Judge Gordon Atchison and Senior Judge Jim Burgess. We are the panel for this case. Just a few preliminary remarks for the attorneys. We have read your briefs, so we're familiar with the facts of your case and what the issues are. You might keep that in mind as you make your argument. Each one of you has 15 minutes for your argument. The appellant's attorney should let us know in advance if you wish to reserve any of your time for rebuttal. After we hear your arguments this morning, we'll take your case will be deemed submitted for decision, and we'll take it under advisement and get a written decision out to you and your clients just as soon as we can. So with that, I'll call the case. It's from Coffey County. It's number 122-695. It's entitled Karen Maley in her capacity as Coffey County Treasurer and also individually versus the Board of County Commissioners of Coffey County. And who do we have here for the appellant?
May it please the court, and good morning, your honors. J. Philip Gregson appearing on behalf of Karen Maley.
And who do we have for the appellee? You're mute. You need to unmute.
Good morning. This is Terrell Mock for the defendant Coffey County Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. Mock. Mr. Gregson, we'll hear your argument. Do you wish to reserve any of your time for rebuttal?
Yes, your honor. I'd like to reserve 3 minutes, please.
That is granted. You can begin whenever you're ready.
All right. May it please the court, I would like to thank your honors here today for your time. I'd also like to thank my client, Karen Maley, for the opportunity to represent her. She's taken a lot of political and social heat as a result of this case. Not coincidentally, as a postscript here, she lost her election back in August. Karen assumed the position of Coffey County Treasurer in February of 2017. She had a wealth of experience as she had literally worked for decades in 2 county treasurer offices, one in Graham County and then of course one in Coffey County. Majority of that time.
I interrupt you. I want to ask a couple of preliminary sort of background questions here, if I might. I found this case to be somewhat unusual in that there doesn't seem to be a lot of rules that govern, but let me back up. I assume Ms. Maley was elected treasurer in 2016, is that correct?
Well, I noticed in preparing for this, your honor, that we said she was elected. Actually, she wasn't. She took over and I believe paid the fee. She completed the term of the prior county treasurer.
Okay, but she did assume the position basically at the end of January or the start of February of 17.
At the start of February of 17, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and so she finished a term of her predecessor.
Well, yes, she did, but
okay,
the election that was held, that was a primary in August, and she's still in office until October of this year. I'm trying to think in my head whether that's a 4-year term or what.
Okay. So she is still the incumbent office holder, but she is a lame duck.
That's correct, your honor.
Okay, that's all right. That doesn't clear things up very much. Does the fact that she's a lame duck affect the remedy in this case in any way?
I don't believe so, your honor. We're asking for her salary to be reinstated for at least 2018, the 2 months they took away from her prior to what was typically, and by practice and policy, they were to do annual salary reviews in April of every year. And of course, as reflected in the briefs, they did a special salary review for her in January after submission of the payment voucher in November.
Okay, and that's the other sort of background question I wanted to ask, and I'm going to ask your counterpart as well. I mean, I've obviously looked at the Weber case, and I've looked at the authority cited in there regarding the Board of Commissioners setting salaries for county treasurers. It looks as if all of that is essentially very general authority for the Board of Commissioners to conduct their business. And I hunted around, I could not find something that I considered a specific statute talking about the Board of Commissioners setting a salary for county treasurers and what rules, if any, apply to that specific process. Am I correct that there is no such authority?
Well, general authority, yeah, I agree with that, Your Honor. But Weber provides a very clear restriction on what it doesn't include. And it's clear that in setting the county treasurer's salary, they certainly can't include an evaluation of what the treasurer is getting through the motor vehicle fund under KSA 8-145. I think Weber's very clear on that point.
That's how I read it.
Yes.
Again, abstractly, is it your understanding or belief that the setting of the salary by a county commission for a treasurer is something that is negotiable? Or is it by fiat of the county commission?
Well, okay. It certainly could be negotiable. And if you read the Weber case, there's some suggestion there that perhaps the parties should engage in negotiation. But having said that, I agree that the county commissioners have the authority to set county treasurer salary for the county treasurer. What they can't do, what they can't do, it's like any employer. You can hire or you can fire somebody for any reason or no reason as long as it's not illegal, right?
Well, and that's another question I have. I mean, the Board of Commissioners cannot fire the treasurer, correct?
Correct.
Okay, well then, that's not the relationship.
Well, I understand that, but they have authority over her in terms of her salary. And that is absolutely an adverse employment action when you reduce somebody's salary by virtue of asserting your statutory right, as my client did here, Your Honor.
All right, let me back up. Given that the general authority that the county commissioners apparently have to set the salary for the position of treasurer, I presume that the law would infer that it has to be a reasonable amount. Would you agree with that? I mean, is that the standard, sort of abstractly, that the county commission must set a, quote, reasonable salary for the treasurer?
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that, taking into the factors unique to that county, which is particularly applicable in this case, given that Coffey County is the only county in the state of Kansas that has a nuclear power plant. But yes, generally speaking, I agree with that.
Okay. Now go on. I'm sorry. I'm distracted you with a lot of stuff that maybe seems important to me, but may not be. So go ahead.
No, I appreciate the questions, Your Honor. Well, with any good retaliation case, it requires an evaluation of the proximity of events. And the triggering event here is the November 6, 2017 submission by my client of a payment voucher seeking payment from the motor vehicle fund in the amount of $10,000 and some change. Now, she submitted that, and I won't reiterate what 8-145 provides other than to say it authorizes the county treasurer to pay herself additional compensation above and beyond, unrelated to whatever salary she's getting under her county salary. So we have November 6, 2017. On November 9th, 2017, my client gets cornered by Commissioner Rowley and the county attorney. And Mr. Rowley tells her, look, if you don't withdraw this voucher, I'm going to call the paper and say terrible things about you for submitting this voucher. There's also a discussion during this meeting about the fact that, hey, if, we may lower your salary. And my client points out, well, there is a written policy. county policy that says that supervisors are to make more than subordinates. Put a pin on that. The next thing is November 13th, 2017. The commissioners are conducting a regular meeting. My client's working in her office. The county attorney comes down the hall and asks my client, hey, can you come to the meeting? Didn't tell her why, didn't ask her to prep that, hey, we're going to evaluate your salary. So she gets up, she goes to the meeting, she walks in, she gets a cold question about how much time do you spend working on county work versus state work or motor vehicle work. And that's how she took it. Off the cuff, without any preparation, she says, well, about 80-20. She leaves that meeting. Next thing you know, on the November 20th commission meeting, the commissioners revoke their policy that says supervisors will make more than their subordinates. Now, following that meeting on December 13th, 2017, my client gets cornered again by Commissioner Meats and the county attorney Phelan. And again, Meats tells her, hey, I'm writing a nasty letter that says you're unethical for submitting this payment voucher, and I'm going to send it to the newspaper if you don't withdraw your voucher. Now, after this meeting, well, let me back up. During the course of that December 13th meeting, it was discussed that the commissioners wanted to lower her salary to $50,000, right? So after that meeting, then the commissioners go to the county clerk and say, hey, put together a 20 or a 14 county salary study and get that to us in regard specifically to my client. Now, they already had a 2016 extensive salary study, which showed my client should have been making, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I think it was in the 70s. They disregarded that despite admitting later in the course of the lawsuit that they'd actually used that study to set other county officials' salaries. So this 14 county salary study gets conducted by the clerk, submitted to the board, and then there's a meeting January 29th, 2018, in which the board reviews my client's salary and decides to lower her salary to $50,000. My client submitted a memorandum explaining, look, that 80-20 was an off-the-cuff thing. There are overlapping duties when the office is processing motor vehicle registrations. Some of that money goes to the state, some of that money goes to the county, some of that goes to the special fund. So some of these activities are duplicative and it's not taken into account. My client tried to explain that. That was disregarded. It was disregarded that at no point could any commissioner recall ever lowering an elected official's salary, number one. They completely deviated from their procedure and their own policy by setting and reviewing my client's salary on a date other than April. And their policy is very clear that we review once a year and it's in April.
Well, counsel, let me ask you a question here.
Sure.
I want to make sure I understand one important fact that I think distinguishes this case from Weber. It's correct in this case that the board, the $62,000 salary that your client had at the beginning, that was intended to cover compensation from the special fund based upon an agreement the board had with prior treasurers. Isn't that right?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Your Honor. They're calling it an agreement, and the record's clear that nobody told my client about it. I think agreement is a euphemism for coercion. If you look at the behavior my client had to endure from the commissioners, and we didn't obviously get to trial, and I would have asked whether or not there was any pressure exerted on the county treasurers to go along with this quote unquote arrangement. And frankly, Your Honor, I consider that an admission that, hey, we've disregarded this statute for years. The commission wants to control the motor vehicle fund. I mean, that's the bottom line in my view. when you start going, hey, well, either you can get it from us or we'll take it back through salary if you assert your right under the motor vehicle fund. If that answers your question, Your Honor.
I believe so, yes. You're
Okay.
actually, you're running into your rebuttal time.
Okay, well, I will leave you with this. I'll refer the court to the brief, but I do wish to quote Justice Johnson in his concurring opinion in Weber, and this is what I think the board did. He notes that I wholeheartedly agree with the majority. I write separately only to express my opinion that any after the fact attempt by the board to reduce the treasurer's salary below the prior year's salary would be highly suspect and if not disingenuous. I submit that the board is engaged in a ruse merely to control the motor vehicle fund. And for that, we request that the court remand the matter to the district court. And I'll reserve my time. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, counsel. You'll still have your 3 minutes of rebuttal. And Ms. Mock, we will now turn to you.
Thank you, Your Honors. And may it please the court, I think that we have to start, this story back about 30 years. When in 1990, the evidence shows in the record that it was actually the treasurer's idea and approached the Board of County Commissioners and said, hey, I don't really like having this lump sum part of my salary come in at the end of the year. I never know what it's going to be. I can't count on it as part of my bi-weekly income for my year. So I would like it if we could make an arrangement where you would pay me my full salary for both state work and county work. And then I will allow any compensation due to me out of the fund, whatever that may be, a lot or a little, to roll over into the county's general fund.
Let me ask you, what is the record evidence of that arrangement?
There's an affidavit by Joanne Raff that's included in the record. Okay. There's also a resolution that the county passed, also included in the record, which provided that the treasurer's salary included compensation for county work and state work.
I'll go back and check the affidavit, but to your recollection, does it say that she initiated this request that she be paid an amount essentially equivalent to what she would have gotten at the end of the year out of the special fund? Or is it?
That was I'm looking at the fact right now, Judge.
Well, I'll go look at it later. Don't waste your time on that.
It says she reached an agreement with the county.
Well, that's it. That's lawyer ambiguous, isn't it?
I guess it is.
All right. Be that as it may, I'm not sure. Let me ask you the same questions that they asked Mr. Gregson. I've looked at Weber and the authority in Weber. Are you aware of any statute or other authority that is more specific than that, dealing with the relationship of a board of county commissioners setting a salary for treasurers?
Well, I don't know that there's statutory authority specific to treasurers, but Chapter 8 talks a lot about county commission authority in setting budgets and salaries for elected officials in general. I mean, I think you can look at Nylander that talks about, that being the Board of County Commissioners' authority to set those budgets and to set those salary. Nothing beyond that, really. I mean, they're restricted beyond that, but their authority as an elected official statutorily is to set those salaries. And I do think that Weber talks about that it's the county's job to set an appropriate salary, okay, for county work.
I understand that.
I don't know that, there's a reasonable, fair, I guess, but I think that's the only word that we have is appropriate. Well,
is that, again, in lawyer speak, something akin to reasonable? I mean, it isn't your position that the board could set an unreasonable salary, is it?
No, I don't think they did that. Not
I'm
at all.
not saying that they did. But so the board has an obligation to set a reasonable salary for the county treasurer. You would agree with that?
I would agree. I would agree with that. I would agree that Nylander really stands for the proposition that the board has an obligation to fund a department so that it can perform its statutory duties. I mean, that's really what they have to do. That's their obligation.
But within that, it's recognized that they get to set the salary for this elected official.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But in the process of setting an appropriate salary, where does that include threatening to send letters to the editor and that type of behavior?
Well,
that's not a reasonable effort, is it?
Yeah, the recitation of facts I take a little issue with, but of course you all have the record in front of you and you can fact check those things. But I will go back a little bit on that timeline. Regardless of what Miss Maley believed or understood, the county commission, it's undisputed, understood that they were paying her, that her salary included 100% of her work duties. They weren't just paying her for county work. They were paying her, as they had, for 30 years, the treasurers before her, 100% of her salary.
Well, and that's what they understood, correct?
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. That's what they understood.
All right. And the judge found, at least for summary judgment purposes, she had no similar understanding, correct?
That's correct. In the light most favorable to the plaintiff, yes. She has testified that she did not know of that agreement. Okay.
So I'm not sure where that gets you then.
Well, I think it goes to the state of mind of the commissioners. They didn't think that or understand that Brenda Cherry, the commissioner or the treasurer before her, they didn't pay her $62,000 and then she turned in a voucher and was paid an additional 10. That never happened.
Was it retaliatory on the commissioner's part to correct their own misunderstanding when they cut the salary from $62,000 to $50,000?
Absolutely not. They were, obviously,
what was it then?
Well, they were, the communication should have happened, Judge. I think that the commissioners would absolutely agree with you that if they could have gone back 11 months and had this discussion with Miss Maley, they would have done so. It would have saved him $10,000. But what they were trying to do was to correct the problem. All of a sudden they had an issue where, wait a minute, we thought we were paying her for 100% of her duties, but apparently, she's going to take 20% of her payment from the state of Kansas. So that means we only need to pay her for 80% because that's the benefit that she's giving to us as the county. And as the county commission, as a taxpayer steward, it's their job to manage the money and make sure that they're only paying for what they're getting out of these elected officials, which is exactly what they did. So they had this problem and they're like, wait, how do we fix this problem? What do we do? We're in a pickle. So they looked at Weber and they read up on it and they said, well, I guess according to Weber, we obviously can't consider the state motor vehicle fund when determining what her adequate county salary would be. I think that the actual language from Weber is that when calculating a county treasurer's annual salary for fulfilling county responsibilities, a board of county commissions may not consider the county's extra compensation provided by statute. Okay, so that's the directive. And then Weber also talks about, well, you need to figure out then how much time and what duties she's doing for the county to determine whether or not you are, appropriately compensating her for her salary. So they set about doing that by asking Miss Maley, well, what is it? How do we figure this out? How you're the one doing the job. How much time do you spend on the county work and how much time do you spend on the state work? And admittedly, she testifies she was caught off guard. This is November 12th. And she says, well, about 80-20. Okay, So then we go and we have a meeting on January 2nd. And, you know, they've gone and done this salary study. You know, they want to make sure that they have a they're establishing a factual basis, which is the directive from Weber, to determine the appropriate salary
Who actually did
counting
this?
duties.
I'm sorry, who actually did the study?
The clerk, the clerk did.
Who clerk?
The county clerk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there evidence in the record about what she did and how she did it?
Yeah, there's a spreadsheet in the record about who she called and what information was provided to her.
Is there an affidavit or was she deposed?
She was deposed.
Is that in the record? I mean, related to how the study was done?
I'm not sure. I would have to double check.
Well, we'll figure that out.
Okay, fair enough. So, I mean, the directive to her is to, you know, let's look at some similar counties and figure out what they're paying their treasurers for county work. So that was her task, and that's what she did. And she considered there is a map in my brief, I think.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, they're largely contiguous counties, and then there were some others that had power plants or something that were thrown in.
That's correct. Lynn County and Jackson County were included as they both have electrical power plants. And then some others that have very similar populations were included.
Okay.
And yeah.
Let me ask you again, going back to the sort of broader question. I didn't double check. I assume that the term of office for a county treasurer is 4 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does the Board of Commissioners, to your understanding generally, have the authority to reduce the salary of an elected treasurer during the term of office? So, or is the treasurer entitled to at least the salary that is set for the office at the time they are elected and assume the term? In other words, does the term create some vested interest in the compensation?
No, not under employment law. No. And there's no contract for employment.
Well, why not? I mean, they're an elected official. They aren't an employee of the board, are they?
Not at all. Absolutely
Okay.
not.
And they have a vested interest in that, in the term of office.
Sure.
And if they assume the term of office with a salary of $50,000, do they have a vested right to receive at least $50,000 a year for the balance of that term?
No, I don't know.
Why not?
I don't know why they would. Why would they? I mean, if something fluctuated in the county and the budget crashed and everybody had to take a hit because there wasn't any money in the pot, I don't see a law. I'm unaware of a law that would prohibit the county from rectifying that and balancing their budget.
Okay, I'm just asking. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of
Yeah.
the problem with this
Sure.
case is there seems to be very little in the way of meets and bounds about the relationship between county treasurers and boards of commissioners.
Well, I do think it's very similar to the boards of commission and your sheriff, your clerk, you know.
Right, and there's not a lot of meets and
deed.
bounds about precisely how those salaries are supposed to be set either, is there?
But
I mean,
I
again,
guess
it goes
I
back
would
to the-
submit.
Go ahead.
I would submit to you that the county, they didn't lower her salary. They didn't lower her salary at all. I mean, her salary was always coming out of two buckets, right? And for 30 years, this bucket poured into this bucket and she was paid here, okay? And now Miss Maley decides, that's not what I want to do. And the board said, okay, that's your statutory right. You get to decide what
You can't
bucket.
say that. You can't say that Ms. Marley decided that's not what I want to do if she was unaware of the prior existing agreement with the other treasurers.
Well, certainly she became aware of it shortly after she turned in the voucher. She withdrew the voucher once and then turned it back in a week later. I mean, she became aware because obviously the commissioners weren't shy about telling her what she was stepping into. I mean, she could have easily stepped back and said, you know what, never mind. Okay, I didn't understand that. Now I do. And that's fine with me. That wasn't her decision. That's not what she elected to do.
Why did she have to step back and say that's fine with me when she never agreed to that salary structure when she took the office?
She didn't have to do that, and she didn't. But because she didn't, the county's no longer responsible for this bucket, right? She's decided she wants to take the money out of this bucket directly from the bucket instead of pouring it over into here. I don't know how else to explain it, and I'm sorry for my hand gestures, but she's decided she wants to have the two sources go directly to her. And they
Which
said,
is what the
okay.
law requires. That she wants the Board of Commissioners to follow the law.
I don't disagree. You're absolutely right.
And the county commissioners had this kind of squirrely arrangement with her predecessor that they never shared with her and just assumed that was the deal. It was their mistake here.
I don't disagree with that either. But they didn't violate the law when they fixed it. And they had an absolute duty to their taxpayers to fix it. Absolutely. Why are you going to pay 100% of somebody's salary for 80% of their work? I wouldn't imagine that goes over very well. And that's the only point those commissioners were trying to make to her. Listen, this is going to get out. You basically what you're saying is you're entitled to $10,000 more a year than the woman that came before you. And
Counsel, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say I'm giving you the same additional couple minutes I'm giving to the other side, but right now you have about a couple minutes to wrap up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I guess I want to kind of wrap this up by saying that, what the commissioners were doing was to try to prevent, I think, the exact problem that occurred in Weber. And if you look at that Weber decision, very clearly what the commission did was reduce her county salary by the amount that her state salary was raised, right? And the district court said, well, what they have to do is pay her the 33. And the 33 is the total payment for both buckets. And Weber said, no, that's clearly not what's to happen here. What you have to do is you have to go back and you have to figure out what money she's due for her county responsibilities. And all Johnson said in his dissent, or I guess concurrence, was that, well, you can't go backwards, okay, from the 27, not from the 23, from the 27. If you do that, that's disingenuous. That's not what the county did here. They were never at the 20. They had to figure out what the 27 was. And they set out to find a factual basis for that number to provide her an appropriate salary for her county duties. And I'm done unless I have any other questions.
I'm not hearing any, so thank you, counsel. Mr. Gregson, you still have your 3 minutes of rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor. My opposing counsel, as well as the district court, are doing exactly what Weber says you can't do, and that's say, well, look, she didn't lose any money because she's getting paid over here from the motor vehicle fund, when never the two shall meet, according to Weber. And let's be very clear here. My client lost $2,400 in annual pay when the county took the action they did, right? They keep saying, well, it's the same thing. No, it's not. She took a pecuniary hit as a result of what the county did. Now, let's be clear that what the county's motivation was she submitted this voucher, and that triggered all this, right? That's a halfway to an admission of retaliation. They just claim, well, gosh, we did this 14 county study. We told the clerk what counties to use. And so, hey, we're good. It's coming in at 46,000 and we're paying her 50. So it's all good. Never mind that it said, the same study said that the county commissioners should be about 18, but they're at 30. They don't consider that study for that purpose. This is a case study in retaliation and pretext like no case I've ever worked on. This court may ultimately not find for us legally, but factually, that's what's gone on here. To coerce and threaten an elected official, how is that doing justice by the taxpayers to go after the county treasurer like that? I submit, Your Honors, that if there was some kind of agreement, why is that not in writing? I mean, really. And it's on the county to have taken the burden of saying, hey, any treasurer that comes in here, guess what? This is our arrangement and you have to agree to it or what? We're not going to give you salary. It all smacks of retaliation, and it all smacks of the board wanting to control the motor vehicle fund. And again,
County, Council, I just want to try to nail down your argument as best I can. Are you saying that the board, as a matter of law, could not reduce your client's salary, period, after she submitted the voucher? Or are you conceding that they had the right to lower her salary, but they just chose an unreasonable figure?
Okay, I am saying, generally speaking, they have the authority to lower the salary. What they did is they deviated from their procedures and written policy in order to retaliate. So what I'm telling the court, and I'll be candid, look, I think she absolutely was entitled to her salary and they could not have lowered it prior to April of 2018. Now, if they wanted to do this thing the right way, they would have allowed her to submit her voucher, had a meeting when they did it normally in April and said, okay, we're going to do a full study on this and do a legitimate study. Weber talks about doing a fair and accurate study. This wasn't fair and accurate. This was designed to punish Karen Maley and to get money back from the motor vehicle fund.
I'm not hearing any other questions, counsel, and that does use up all of your time. So both of you, again, I want to thank you very much for your briefs and your arguments. We will get a written decision out to you and your clients just as soon as we can. And with that, that completes the hearing and we are adjourned. Thank you.